everybody, welcome back to Bubbles and Splash. Now, what have you been doing this week? How has your week been? Have you had fun? I've had fun. It's been great this week. Really enjoyed it. Now, last week, do you remember we were talking about David? And we were talking about how David became king. And when he became king, he was a really important king. And I told you that his great grandson was really important and really famous. And I left you wondering, who might his great grandson be? Now, did any of you manage to figure that out? Well, let me tell you who his great grandson was. It was, drumroll, it was Jesus. Of course it was Jesus. Jesus' great grandfather was King David. And there's loads of stuff in the Bible about how important that was. And first things like the city of David and loads of different things about David in relation to Jesus. Now, we're going to come back to Jesus in a minute because we're going to have a story that Jesus told this week. But before we do, I've got some sad news to share with you. So are you ready? My sad news is that this is going to be our last Bubbles and Splash for a few weeks. Because schools are breaking up for holidays and so are nurseries. And so is Bubbles and Splash. Bubbles and Splash is breaking up for summer holidays too. So I'm not going to see you for a few weeks while we're all on summer holidays. But don't let that stop you enjoying today, because today we have still got a great story and we've got a craft activity and I've got a wonderful song to leave you with for the summer holidays. Now, the clever among you might have noticed I've got a friend with me today. My friend is called Brown Bear, and Brown Bear has been with me through some adventures. Oh my goodness, we've had some adventures together, haven't we, Brown Bear? And this week we had an adventure and Brown Bear hurt his head. And I had to look after him. And I had to put a plaster on his head to make it all better. But it got me thinking about what would have happened if I hadn't have been there to help Brown Bear out. Who would have helped him out? Would anybody have helped Brown Bear? Well, Jesus once told a story about a man who got hurt and needed somebody to help him out. And that's going to be our story for today. So let us make a start with that one. So, Jesus told the story about this man. And this man was going on a journey from the city called Jerusalem to a city called Jericho. And he was walking along the road. But little did he know that hidden behind a rock were some nasty, mean robbers, and they were watching him. And they were looking at the things he had and thinking that they would like his things. And so they crept out from behind their rock, up behind him, and bish, bash, boof, poof, ping, poof, wing. They beat him up and they took his things and they left him with no clothes. And he had bruises and battered and he had cuts on him. And they left him lying on the side of the road and ran away with all his things. And so the poor man was left there. He was lying there, in pain and all bruised and with no clothes, just his underwear left. And he needed help. He couldn't get himself anywhere. He was too hurt. So, a little while later, a man came along the road. And this man, he was a priest. Now, a priest is someone who served in the temple that David had made. He was like one of the really important people, a bit like the vicar is in our church. A bit like that, a bit like Alan is in our church. He was the important person who was at the front doing everything. And so Is that the kind of person that you would expect to help out this man who had been beaten and battered and bruised and left without any clothes and had all his things taken away? What do you reckon? Is it a yes? Shout now if you think it's a yes. Okay, what about if it's a no? Shout now as loud as you can if you think it's a no. Well, those of you who said no were actually right, because although we'd expect the priest to help, he didn't help. He came up, he saw the man, he thought he needed help, and he looked around and he thought, I wonder where the robbers are. They might still be here, they might get me. I better leave quick. And so he crossed over the road and he ran and he walked off and ran away. He wasn't a very nice priest. So our poor man, he's still lying there. He's still battered and bruised and in need of some help. And so a little while later, another man comes along, and this man is a Levite. And so the Levite comes up, and Levites were people who, they were religious too. And they had a role in the temple to help out and do different things. So it's a bit like somebody who's a helper in our church. So if you know maybe Paul Richardson, who's a warden, he's a helper in our church. And so is he the kind of person you would expect to help out? A Levite? Would you expect the Levite to help out? Somebody who's a helper at the church? Yeah, I think you would, wouldn't you? But do you know what? He didn't. The Levite didn't help out. He did what the priest had done. He came up and he looked at the man and he saw his bruises and he looked around and thought, I wonder where the robbers are. They might come and get me. So he crossed over the road and he walked away and ran away as well. So our poor man, he is still sat there, all hurt and bruised and battered. He has no money, he has no clothes, and he has nobody to help him. Well, a little while later, another person came along. Now, this person was a Samaritan. Now, that meant that he came from a town called Samaria. So the people who came from Samaria are called Samaritans, just like the people who come from Lee are called Lathers. It was just a way of describing where they came from. So this Samaritan man, he came along, and he wasn't somebody that you would expect to help the man, because the place where the man came from and Samaria, they were enemies. So the Samaritan was really an enemy of this man. And so would you expect your enemy to help you? Somebody that you didn't get along with? You wouldn't really expect them to help them, would you? But this Samaritan, he came up and he saw the man there, and he looked just like the priest and the Levite had done, and he saw that the man was battered and he was bruised and he had no clothes and all his things had been taken. And what do you think he did? Now, if you said he crossed over the road and he walked on by, you are not correct in this instance, because this Samaritan was very, very special. And this Samaritan, he knelt down next to the man and he took out of his bag some bandages and he started to bandage up the man's arm and the man's head, all the places where he'd been cut and bruised and battered. And he gave him a cloak to put over him so that he could cover himself up because he had no clothes. And then the man, the Samaritan, he picked the man up and he put him on his donkey. And he walked him on his donkey to the nearest inn. Now, an inn is a little bit like a hotel. It's a place where you can go and stay overnight and pay to stay there. And so he took him to the inn, and he did a better job then when he got back. He took all the bandages off and he cleaned all his wounds with some water and then put some nice clean bandages on. And he gave the man a bed to sleep in at the inn and made sure through the night that he was okay and looked after him. And in the morning, the Samaritan said to the innkeeper, the person who was in charge of the inn, he said to him, I need you to look after him. He said, I've got to go on my business, but here's some money, you look after him. And if he needs feeding, or if he needs water, or if he needs looking after any more, then you do that for him. And in a couple of days, when I come back from my trip, he said, if I owe you any more money, he said, I'll pay it. I'll check in and I'll pay it for you. But you just look after the man for me, please, and make sure that he's okay. So the innkeeper, he kept the man in his inn and he took care of him and he looked after him for the Samaritan man while the Samaritan man went on his journey. And so Jesus said to the people that he was telling the story to, he said, who do you think was the better friend to the man? Was it the priest? No, because the priest, he was a godly man, but he just walked on by. Was it the Levite? He was another godly man, but No, he just walked on by too. In fact, it was the person who you least expected, the one who was the enemy, that actually helped the man who'd been beaten and battered and bruised. And he was the one who took care of him and looked after him. And even though they were enemies, he was kind to him. And Jesus said, he said, you shouldn't just be kind and loving to the people that you know and that are like you. He said, you should be loving and you should be kind to everybody, because everybody is part of my creation. So today we're talking about being loving and being kind. Oh, it doesn't cost anything to be kind, does it? We can be kind to whoever we like, and we can be kind to everybody. And Jesus said you should be kind to everybody. In fact, do you know what? Jesus gave us 2 commandments. That's all he told us. He said, love God. That's commandment number 1. And commandment number 2 is love your neighbour as yourself. And basically that means love everybody else around you just like you love yourself. So Jesus told us to be kind and to be loving towards other people around us. So do you think that's something that you can do today? I think it is. Now we've got a fabulous craft activity coming up in a minute, and then we've got a song for you to learn and for you to take through into the summer holidays. So why don't we go next door into the kitchen and we'll get on with our craft.